Evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to give it another minute to let everybody join. So last chance to grab a cup of tea if you need one before we get started. Right, okay. I think we're about there, so we'll kick things off. First of all, thanks to everyone for attending this evening's webinar regarding energy efficiency. I'll just start by introducing myself and my colleagues taking part in this evening's webinar. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Sam Rickard and I'm the Housing Regulation Manager with Private Sector Housing. So I'm joined this evening by my colleague Gemma Moreau, who's going to be working in the background to make sure that things run smoothly. No pressure, Gemma. Gem, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name's Gemma Moreau, and I am the Landlord and Tenant Support Officer for Private Sector Housing. My role is to understand and support with issues which are experienced by both landlords and tenants, and I'm really happy to see so many of you have come along tonight. A lot of you will already have my contact details, but just to let you know, they're on the website, and I will also be sharing them with everyone after tonight's webinar. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gemma. And finally, this evening's presenter will be Liam Collins from our Energy Services team. Liam, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hello everybody, my name is Liam. I'm the Domestic Energy Advisor for Portsmouth City Council. My role basically spans across different avenues of energy, but mainly around providing energy advice and retrofit advice.
Wonderful. Cheers, Liam. So really hoping that this evening's webinar is useful and informative for everybody. There's no doubt that the topic of energy efficiency in the private rented sector will be on the minds of a lot of landlords at the moment, particularly considering proposals in the pipeline from government to increase EPC requirements to meet a C rating up from the current standard of E, potentially by 2030, alongside some other proposals to increase maximum spend on energy efficiency measures. And I think many of you would have likely seen the public consultation that ran earlier this year, which really sought to capture stakeholders' views around some of those proposals. We don't yet know what the outcome of that consultation is, nor any final proposals around changes to legislation. But we do know that government have signalled change in this area for quite some time. So really, the focus of today's webinar will be around what support is available for landlords to prepare for possible changes on the horizon, in particular grants and schemes available that may help deal with the cost of energy efficiency improvements in your properties. So with all that said, I'll hand over to my colleague Liam to take us through the presentation. If you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A and we'll try our best to get around to those at the end. All right, Liam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam. So just loading up the presentation now. Wonderful. So as already mentioned, my name's Liam. I am going to be talking through this presentation on behalf of Switched On Portsmouth today. The topics we're going to take a look at today will be a quick introduction around Switched On Portsmouth and the service. We'll take a look at EPCs, MEs, and that will include both the current and the potential changes, retrofit measures, schemes and support, and then, like Sam said, we'll open up to a Q&A as well. So, Switched on Portsmouth is a Portsmouth City Council initiative aimed at saving Portsmouth, Gosport and Havant residents energy, money and carbon. This is achieved by offering free energy advice, sourcing additional funding and referrals into larger schemes. We work in collaboration with various organisations. It could be local charities, support groups, local and central government. We've already mentioned EPCs, and I'm sure some of you, well, all of you probably know what this is. It stands for Energy Performance Certificate. Essentially, it's a rating given to a property on its energy performance. So A being the most efficient and G being the least. Certificates currently last for 10 years, and they give information on recommendations for improving your home's energy efficiency, potential costs and energy improvements, potential savings, current EPC rating, and a potential rating. You can check the Gov website if you for your EPC if you have one. If you need one, you can use the same link or the same website to find an accredited assessor. Here's just a kind of a snapshot of just what an EPC would look like. On the left, you have the current and potential rating. On the right-hand side, it will give you an idea of a couple of different improvements you can make to your property. A few things to note on this, however, are if your EPC is, let's say, 9 years old, the install cost as well as the typical saving could be completely different. Just, prices of materials, labour, and the cost of energy just changes quite a lot. It will give you an idea of how much this measure would improve your EPC as well. So always worth taking a look at that. If you need a new EPC, it might be worth looking at getting one. So there are going to be some potential changes to EPCs. It looks like it could happen next year, but we don't know for certain. It looks like it's going to be a complete overhaul of what we know as EPCs. So it will take into consideration more around the building fabric efficiency. So that will be things like insulation. It will be the heating system efficiency. So that would be looking at, greener technologies. So it could be an air source heat pump, for example, over a gas boiler. Smart technology readiness, carbon, the output or the use, as well as energy cost and use for that building. The kind of idea for the overhaul was really to give a more accurate and a better insight into EPCs and the property itself. So hopefully those changes, when they are announced, will just give a bit more in-depth and a bit more of an accurate approach to energy performance around homes. We've already mentioned MEES, but for those that don't know, it stands for Minimum Energy Efficiency Standards. Essentially, it's the minimum requirement for EPC for a property to be legally let. So it's currently rating at an E. There are exemptions to this, so certain buildings don't require an EPC, or maybe the building's just too costly to retrofit. You can essentially apply for an exemption. There are potential changes coming this way. So Sam said earlier, there is a consultation that took place earlier in the year. It's looking to increase the minimum EPC to a C for properties. And it could begin in a phased rollout in 2028 to reach 2030. One of the biggest changes on there would be an increase in cost cap as well. So from around £3,000 up to £15,000. Again, there are exemptions to lower that down. And I think it's really just worth noting that a lot of these changes, aren't set in stone. We don't fully know what's going to happen, and it's not a full commitment yet. So we'll do our best to keep you updated as best we can. But again, it's kind of just a bit of a guess, or just going on old consultations at the moment. Linking in EPCs a bit close to Portsmouth. Some of you might already know Portsmouth is a bit of a unique case. It's quite challenging to retrofit some of the housing stock we have in Portsmouth. We've got a really wide variety of properties. So we've got listed buildings, high-rise, flats, and BISFs as well, so non-standard construction properties. The most common EPC in Portsmouth currently is D, and the most common potential EPC rating is C. Now that doesn't just apply to the private rented, that's across every EPC in Portsmouth. So it's just really there to show, that there are a lot of properties that still can get to a C. The images on the PowerPoint slide at the moment just give you an idea of what a before and after could look like. This is a property in Paulsgrove that has recently been retrofitted. It received retrofit measures including external wall insulation, double glazed windows and loft insulation. So this property should have a huge improvement in terms of thermal retention and energy efficiency. And you can see there it looks quite drastically different. We've said retrofit a couple of times, but what really does retrofit mean? So retrofit is when you upgrade an existing building to improve the energy efficiency of that building. It covers a large list of different measures, so it could be insulation, like a fabric first approach. It could be heating systems like air source heat pumps, renewable technologies like PV, and even branch into like ventilation. Some of the key benefits to retrofitting a property would be reduced energy bills and carbon, helps meet future MEES and EPC requirements, increases property value and tenant satisfaction, increases occupants' health and reduced strain on NHS, and supports the UK's net zero goals. So the next section, we're talking through different retrofit measures, a little bit about how much it costs to install, how much it costs to say, how much it could save you as well per year. There is just a little bit of thing to bear in mind with this. All of these costings are a bit of an estimate, so we really do recommend that you find an installer and carry out like a survey for your property. That way you'll get an accurate cost and potential saving. There's a couple of different websites you can use, and I'm sure there are plenty more for this. But MCS and Trustmark are ones that we quite often recommend. They're officially backed, and that way you can make sure that any of the installers on the list are accredited or at least competent to a certain level. So I'm going to take a quick break from talking. We're going to look at a couple of videos just around wall insulation.
Did you know that about 1/3 of all heat loss in your home is through uninsulated walls? Adding insulation to your walls keeps more heat in, reducing your heating bills and keeping your home comfortable. If your home was built before the 1920s, it's very likely that your property has solid walls. Solid walls have no gap between the outer and inner brickwork, so they can't be filled with cavity wall insulation. You can work out whether your wall is solid or cavity brickwork by looking at the pattern of the bricks on the outside of your house. If your home has solid walls, the bricks will have an alternating pattern, and you will be able to see the ends of the bricks. If your home has cavity walls, the bricks will have an even pattern, as they will all be laid lengthways. If you can't see the bricks, a surveyor will be able to tell you by measuring the thickness of the walls. If your walls do have a gap, but this gap is too narrow for cavity insulation, solid wall insulation can be used instead. Solid walls can be insulated from the inside or the outside of the property. This will help make your house warmer in winter and cooler in summer. Wall insulation is fitted internally by fixing rigid insulation boards to the wall. This can be done room by room to minimize disruption. External wall insulation involves a layer of insulation material being fixed to the outside of the wall, which is then covered with a render to create a smooth new finish. This can renew the look of your home and protects the brickwork. Installing internal or external wall insulation will not only save you money, but will also help to reduce your carbon footprint. To find out more, visit switchedonportsmouth.co.uk.
Great, so I think that video just gives a really good understanding of what cavity wall insulation is, as well as solid wall insulation. You probably know if you have insulation already in your property, but if you don't, cavity wall can kind of be a bit hidden sometimes. So what you can do is look for drill holes that have been patched up in the brickwork or in between the bricks. The kind of benefits of cavity wall insulation and kind of the savings and the install costs will vary from property to property. You can look at spending around £5,000 for a property for cavity wall insulation. That is on the higher end, but it could include things like a brickwork repair. Maybe it's a larger property or semi-detached or slightly more complex. It can save you around £400 a year as well. So, the payback period there is quite good. If we look at solid wall insulation, it is considerably more expensive, unfortunately, and you'd likely know if you have this installed already. For like large semi-detached properties, it could be like £30,000, which is a substantial sum. A lot more properties around Portsmouth probably be a bit cheaper than that potentially, but you can save around £500 per year. It's just a lot more labour going into the actual works compared to cavity wall insulation. It's a lot more materials, and as the video said, it has to have like a render finish applied as well. So it's an additional step that cavity wall doesn't have. Loft insulation is a fairly common insulation method. We currently recommend around 270 millimeters of depth for the most efficient. And it really does depend on the size of the loft. A lot of lofts will have, a lot of old storage units up in the loft. It could be that it's boarded and that needs to be redone, or maybe you've got loft insulation already that's damp old or just needs renewing. So the cost could increase to install because there might be a removal aspect included, but you can look around £1,300 for a loft. And the saving there given is £350 a year. Although it's a potential saving, if you are just doing a small top up of loft insulation, just bear in mind it won't be quite as much of a saving compared to just going through like zero loft insulation to brand new loft insulation. We have another short video which will explain solar PV in a bit more detail.
Solar panels are made up of photovoltaic cells, otherwise known as PV, which converts solar energy from the sun into electricity for your home. Solar panels can even generate electricity on cloudy days. Solar PV is a very effective way to make your home more environmentally friendly because energy generated by the panels is renewable and carbon-free. A typical solar panel lasts for approximately 25 years. A good system should pay for itself within 10 to 15 years, leaving you with totally free energy during the remaining lifetime of the system. Not only will a solar PV system save you money, it will also help to reduce your carbon footprint. Any electricity you generate but do not use can be sold to the grid or stored for later use via a battery or thermal store. The Smart Export Guarantee, SEG, means you must receive payment from your electricity supplier for each unit of electricity you export. However, this amount will vary between suppliers, so make sure you shop around for the best deal. When selecting an installer, you should look for one that is MCS accredited. They will have passed all the quality and technical standards required to install the system safely. A solar PV system should not take much longer than a day to install. Your roof needs to be in good condition and able to take the weight of the panels. Your installer will check this during the initial survey. Once installed, your solar PV system will require very little maintenance. The panels have a special coating, which enables them to self-clean, but you can get them cleaned occasionally to ensure peak performance. To find out more, visit switchedonportsmouth.co.uk.
Wonderful. So again, I think the video explains it pretty well. There are a couple of things to bear in mind with solar PV. So it's already mentioned the roof, making sure that your roof is in good condition. It's also important to make sure that your orientation of your roof is suitable, and also that you're not blocked by any large trees that will shade the solar panels when they're installed. That will affect the efficiency of them, quite significantly. The cost to install solar PV does vary again depending on the size of the roof, the amount of panels you have, and also if you have a battery installed as well. So you could look at around 3 kilowatts system with a 5 kilowatt battery, cost around £10,000 with a potential saving of £81, £86 a month. So again, payback periods, as mentioned, 10 to 15 years, depending on the weather. You can get them without a battery. It does cost a little bit less. So in this case, £7,500. And the savings a bit less again at 47 to 56. There are a lot of energy suppliers now that will offer kind of unique tariffs. So you can store the battery. You can store the battery with electric overnight for cheaper. Use it during the day. It's mentioned the Smart Export Guarantee tariff as well. So if you have solar, it's really worth looking at your energy supplier or shopping around and just seeing what offers are available. The next one we have is air source heat pumps.
What is an air source heat pump? Heat pumps are used to provide heating and hot water for your home and replace your typical gas boiler. They work in a similar way to an air conditioning unit, but in reverse. They use ambient air to heat a refrigerant with a low boiling point, which in turn is used to heat a hot water tank to provide heating and hot water to your home. A typical system will have a heat pump and a hot water tank to store the heat produced. Heat pumps work best with underfloor heating, but you can use radiators or a combination of the two. Because heat pumps run at a lower temperature than a typical boiler, the radiators will need to be larger than usual. Heat pumps use electricity to run, but for every unit they consume, they produce 3 units of heat, making them far more efficient than other electric heating technologies and much cheaper to run. To work effectively, your home will need to be well insulated. A qualified and accredited installer will need to carry out the installation. As well as saving you money on your heating bills, they will significantly reduce your carbon footprint, saving up to 70% of emissions compared to gas or direct electric heating. By switching to a renewable electricity tariff, you could make this saving even larger. To find out more, visit switchedonportsmouth.co.uk.
Okay, so that covers air source heat pumps. There are a couple of different types of heat pumps. You can get hybrid systems as well as ground source heat pumps. They work a little bit differently, but for an air source heat pump, it can cost around £15,000 because a lot of properties will require additional pipework to be run, upsizing or changing of radiators or installing underfloor heating. We do advise taking a fabric first approach with an air source heat pump, so making sure that the property is well insulated. Although air source heat pumps are extremely efficient, 3 to 4 times efficient of a gas boiler, it does kind of depend on the energy pricing you're paying as well. So electric is considerably more expensive than gas at the moment. So it's always worth taking a look at insulating your property, looking at how much you can get in terms of grant funding for a heat pump, and then also looking at the eligible tariffs that are available to you. Again, quite a lot of suppliers now will offer unique tariffs for air source heat pumps, solar PV, and EV chargers. So we've taken a look at MEES, EPCs, and also some retrofit measures. This next and last section really is going to cover different schemes and support available. Some of them will be aimed more at residents, some of them will be aimed more towards the homeowner. So the first one is eligible for Portsmouth residents. Essentially, it's a free phone advice line switched on Portsmouth Manage. It's a phone line open Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. You'll get through to an energy advisor who can provide in-depth energy advice and support. It covers topics like understanding your bill, your heating systems, referrals into local support schemes, and also referrals into larger schemes that we'll mention in a moment. So if you're a private landlord looking for a bit of advice, you can phone this number. If you're a tenant just wanting to understand how to pay your energy bills or a bit of advice, you can call this number as well. If you don't fall within Portsmouth and you fall with Hampshire, there is a separate number. It goes to the same place, so they should redirect you. It shouldn't make too much difference if you dial the wrong one. The next scheme is the Local Energy Advice Partnership. We refer to this as LEAP, and it's very similar. They offer a free phone advice line to eligible residents, but they also offer a home visit. So with the home visit, they look at additional schemes for you and they try and install smaller measures. So it could be free LED lighting, for example, also water efficiency measures. And they also do referrals into additional income like Income Max or third parties. LEAP also offer a white good replacement scheme. So this scheme essentially means that they'll do a home visit for you. And if you have like an old fridge, for example, that's faulty or like 9 years old, let's say, they might be able to swap it for a new one. Now, it won't necessarily be like for like. So if you've got a tall Samsung, like American style fridge, they won't replace it with the exact same model. It could just be like a box standard kind of a white good. But the idea of that scheme really is to give you a working appliance, but also a more energy efficient one. It is a replacement service, so they will remove the old good and install a new one for you. So yeah, make sure that white good is still in place. They'll take it and dispose of it properly. The eligibility for those schemes, it will rather be a means tested benefit listed on the slide or a household income of £31,000 or less a year. The next scheme is a larger scheme, and it's the Energy Company Obligation. So the Energy Company Obligation, or ECO, allows for larger measures to be installed. So this could be insulation, heat pumps, or solar PV. It's available to owner-occupiers and private-let properties. There could be a cost incurred to this, so you may have to pay 50%, 10%, really depends on the measures and the supplier. They will tell you how much it would come to before they start the work, so don't think once you apply for the scheme they're going to do the works and then leave you like a £3,000 bill, for example. They'd be transparent before you agree to anything. The eligibility for this scheme would be for an owner-occupier of an EPC of D or below. If it's a private rented property, then it would be an EPC of E or below. There would need to be a household income of £31,000 or less a year, or receive a means tested benefit, or you can apply through EcoFlex, which is available on the Portsmouth City Council website. All that the EcoFlex is a document which allows additional pathways into schemes. So an example in this case could be a household that is privately rented, an F EPC. The household earns more than £31,000 a year, but they have a health condition which is worsened by cold. That person could still potentially apply and benefit from the scheme, even if they earn too much, because of a different pathway. And again, that is available on the Portsmouth City Council website. To apply for the scheme, you can go through a list of energy suppliers that offer. There is a link there, so when we send the slides out, you should be able to use that. The next one is the boiler upgrade scheme. Again, you can access this funding through energy suppliers or a trusted installer. The scheme really is aimed at removing a fossil fuel heating system from a property and replacing it with a renewable source or greener technology, such as an air source heat pump. It's roughly about 50% of the cost that you incur for this, so around £7,500 towards a heat pump or a ground source heat pump, and around £5,000 towards a biomass boiler. Your property must have a valid EPC for this as well, and it will require a cost contribution. It won't fully fund the install of any of those measures. The last large scheme that we have is the Warm Homes Local Grant. So this scheme is similar to ECO in that it does large upgrades such as insulation, solar PV, and air source heat pumps. The eligibility for this scheme would be that you fall within a IMD postcode, which you can use on that link when the slides come out. So that's like an auto qualifier for your area. If not, you need to demonstrate that you are in receipt of means tested benefits, or the household income is £36,000 or less a year. So you only need one of those initial pathways. Some additional eligibility criteria. The property must have an EPC of D or below. For private owned, if it's private rented, it will need to have an EPC of D or E. Unless it's MEES exempt, then you can apply for a lower EPC rating. Owner-occupier and private rented sector households are eligible. It also covers all fuel types, so you don't need to be removing a gas boiler and going to renewables. And it doesn't matter if you've got like a wood, like a log burner, for example, either. Owner-occupiers aren't really expected to pay any contributions towards this. It should be completely free. If you're a private landlord, the property that you get, if you're eligible for the scheme, one property will be completely free, so it'll be fully funded. Any additional properties after that, you would need to look at around 50% cost contribution. So if you've got any properties lined up, maybe there's one in your portfolio that might be a bit more expensive to retrofit, or one that you don't think you'll be able to do, apply for the scheme. If your tenant is eligible, then you can get it completely for free. It's worth noting, though, that all schemes are subject to funding and they can close quite suddenly. These are all really popular. There's a lot of households out there that need additional help with energy efficiency, especially the larger ones where there's a lot of money that goes into it. So I'd recommend that anyone apply for them. The worst case scenario is you're no worse off. And listed here are just a couple of links. The first two are different organisations, and the last two, would be links to the Portsmouth City Council website. Just different sources of information, additional help. We've got the Household Support Fund, for example. You could apply for like daily costs like food or energy bills. But that is it for the presentation. So firstly, thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to listen. There is a website link there, and please bear in mind that the website is currently undergoing some changes, so if it's a little bit glitchy or clunky, please bear with us. I've included the free fund advice line, a shared inbox, and also my work email. So if you have any questions after this or need any advice or support, then please feel free to reach out to me.
Amazing. Thank you, Liam. Really appreciate that. We did have a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll move on to those if that's okay with you. So this first question, Liam, somebody's asked here what Switched On Portsmouth are doing to ensure contractors that are undertaking grant-funded works are doing a good job. This person's had quite a few bad experiences by the sounds of things, and they're sort of referencing another local authority that they're aware of where there's a kind of working relationship with the building control team over there, and they're sort of looking at grant-funded works. I appreciate that might not be your area of work within the energy team, so if we need to take that away and maybe come back to the group, we can do. I'd also imagine that some of the works that you've outlined within your presentation would be considered controlled works anyway, so building control approval would probably be needed for those. But do you know if there are any further steps taken to kind of verify that grant funding is used as intended and that works meet a good standard?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things. So it might not be Switched On Portsmouth specifically, but an example is the Warm Homes Local Grant. Portsmouth City Council's energy team currently lead a consortium of around 31 LAs. We've made sure that we've partnered with a delivery partner. They do a whole onboarding process of all of the installers. There's different kind of follow-up works that happen, like sign-off, quality surveys. We make sure that everyone's accredited for MCS. We also look at Trustmark. And PAS comes into it quite a lot as well. So PAS 2035, which is like a standard for retrofit. Basically, any kind of retrofit works go on. Those are kind of the steps we look at. If somebody has had works installed and they're not too sure, they can always reach out to the installer or the scheme delivery partner as well. It's something they might be able to do like a quick inspection or visit for as a follow-up.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, really good to hear. This next person has perhaps commented here that they are they're keen to understand what can practically be done to get a Victorian sort of terraced house typical in Portsmouth to an EPCFC. And I mean, you touched on this really, Liam, in your presentation. I think you talked about the unique position that we're in Portsmouth. I know from looking at this myself, actually, I could see that around a third of properties in the private rented sector are sort of pre-1920s build, so tend to be some of the least sort of thermally efficient properties and perhaps the hardest to improve. There likely will be measures that are relevant for older homes. You touched on a lot of them in presentation, loft insulation, really down to sort of basic stuff like energy efficient lighting. We should probably caveat and say it wouldn't be right for us to talk about specific measures in this webinar relevant to a person's property, and would always recommend people seek out a competent building surveyor when they're thinking about undergoing works. So I don't know if you had anything to sort of add to that. This person's concerned about kind of getting an older property up to an EPC rating of C.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely right for concern. Some properties just are much more difficult to retrofit than others. Like Sam said, without seeing the property or having like a kind of a case scenario, it's really hard to comment on what we could recommend or what would be an option. But as I kind of mentioned in the presentation, go through Trustmark, go through MCS and see if there is any kind of accredited installers local to you that can provide a quote or some advice. It might mean that you have to shift kind of the I suppose retrofit measures away from external wall insulation to internal wall insulation, or if you don't have a cavity, look at solid wall insulation. So yeah, it is really kind of vague, unfortunately, but get someone who's competent and qualified out to have a quick look, and they can give you a more in-depth breakdown, really.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Liam. Somebody's asked here, I think specifically about the boiler upgrade scheme. They've referenced the eligibility being that you own the property. This person is asking, is that available for a limited company that owns a property to which perhaps you're the director of, or does the property have to be listed in that person's name?
Quite honestly, I wouldn't be too sure. I'd have to have a look. I think
Sure.
On the Gov website for the boiler upgrade scheme, it does mention it doesn't have to be a domestic dwelling. I think it can be a business, but I'd have to double check. So whoever that person is, please feel free to drop me an email, or Sam, if you can capture their details, I can catch up with them later on.
Yeah, will do. we can take that one away and look at that, and when we share the slides and the link to the video from this evening, we can add that to the web page, and also we can give an expansion on that answer. Really brilliant. Okay, there's a question here. I suspect, Liam, I know the answer to this one, but we'll ask anyway. This person's asking, do you know what a current C EPC rating is likely to be under the new EPC scheme? I think it's a question of that's still undergoing review, so sadly I don't think we're going to be able to answer that one, but welcome any thoughts that you might have on that.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. Until it's kind of announced, we're really in a similar situation to yourselves. We don't fully know what it's going to look like. We kind of have guesses like everyone else, and there's been consultations, but until it's fully announced, yeah, I really couldn't say, unfortunately. So sorry for that.
No, that's okay. I suspected that would be the answer. It's undergoing review at the moment, isn't it? So yeah, we're living in the unknown at the moment. But as and when we know more information around that, we'll certainly look to publish some content online. We've got Gemma with us this evening. Gemma runs the newsletter that I'm sure most of you get. So we'll look to sort of publish content as and when we know it through those channels. Sorry, Liam, I'm pausing for a moment because there's a bit of a delay, I think, between people writing questions and them sort of coming through. So apologies if I go quiet for a second. So there's a person here who's talking about sadly quite a bad experience from previous installation schemes. A bit of a theme here based on the first question that I read out. They're sort of describing that one of the issues they've had are where properties one of the issues are properties with cavity wall insulation, because the installer didn't issue a certificate. The EPC surveyor almost won't recognise that in the rating. Don't know if that's something that really sort of sits within your remit. Really, they're sort of describing where they've had an installation done to improve the energy efficiency of the property, but that wasn't done very well and it wasn't certified, and now they're in a bit of a sticky situation where the most recent EPC doesn't really recognise that. I don't know if that's something you've come across, or if there's any advice that you would give that person at all.
Potentially. So with an EPC, kind of the way that they're carried out with cavity wall insulation is sometimes they might need evidence. So if there's no signs of the external brickwork having drill holes that have been patched up and repaired, which is kind of like an EPC point of view, like a key indicator you've got it, then yeah, documentation would be really helpful. It might be worth looking at getting another EPC or talking to the person who carried out your EPC post cavity wall installation, just to see if there's anything they could recommend. With that, if you've got clear kind of indication on the external brickwork, I'd say that generally that's a good indicator you've got it installed. And when you put that into the EPC software, generally it will just do like a calculation based on your property age and the cavity wall insulation being there. So it's kind of like an automated step as such. So yeah, I'm more than happy to take that away and have a look for you and see what it says there. But it could be worth getting in touch with the EPC assessor or seeing if there is any way of getting the paperwork, as just in case proof is required for that.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Liam. Your information will be circulated. I know we've already said that, but just to highlight that again, your information will be circulated along with the slides and everything that we've talked about today. So yeah, thanks for the offer there. Appreciate it. So this person's writing here, they've spent quite a considerable amount of time battling with sort of damp issues caused by perhaps sort of structural issues and various other things in their property. They've said here they would not have cavity wall installed after trying to get the damp sort of dealt with. Perhaps they've had some bad experiences around doing that. Right, okay, so they're saying would not have cavity wall installed after trying to get the damp transfer cured between the walls. Is that something that I can ask to be taken into account on the EPC assessment? Sorry, Liam, you know, bit specific there. This person's actually said, sorry to be a bit specific, they're concerned with changes coming down the line, potentially around increasing EPC ratings to a C, perhaps worried that their property won't meet that. They're just asking, is that something that can be taken into account on their EPC assessment, specifically that thing around damp transfer cure between the walls?
As far as I'm aware at the moment, the current way EPCs are calculated, you can't. So if you've got like a faulty measure installed, I think the system kind of just blankets that it's installed. So if you had solar on the roof but it was broken, I don't think it takes into consideration that it isn't working. The same as cavity wall. I think if it's kind of marked down as you do have it, it's kind of like a blanket that it is still there. I mean, sorry to hear that you've been having issues with damper mold as well. It could be something that the new EPC overhaul would see a change to. So, you know, the quality of work maybe might take a place into it. But yeah, as far as I'm aware at the moment, it doesn't really give you like a tick box to say how good or poor the insulation is.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. This person's actually not put a question, but I think be really good to read out what they've said here. So they've said not a question, but just for some information. Improving your EPC rating to an A or B can make you eligible for green mortgages, which often offer lower interest rates and better terms. This is another strong reason to upgrade your property's energy efficiency. Really good point, actually. So thank you, whoever that was, for posting that in the Q&A. Green, I'll read it again. Yeah, eligible for green mortgages. Is that something that your team have any sort of dealings with around the sort of advice and support that you give out, Liam?
No, not that I'm aware of, at least personally. It's not something I've ever dealt with. But it's, yeah, whoever's put that, thank you. It's really interesting to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm going to go quiet again just whilst there's a bit of a delay, I think, between people writing things and them popping up on my screen. No, okay. There's nothing else coming through to the Q&A, so happy to just sort of pause for a moment in case anybody's got anything else they want to put into the Q&A at all, any sort of specific questions around what Liam's covered. We will make sure that the video's made available for people afterwards. We'll share it with the group. We'll be putting it on the website. Gemma's information will be on there. Liam's information will be on there. So, you know, if you've forgotten to mention anything this evening, please don't worry. There's plenty of time to get in touch with us. You're always welcome to get in touch with us. It's not a problem. And like I said, we'll share that with everybody when that's done. Oh, one's just come through actually. Liam, are you aware of any grants for student properties in the private rented sector? Anything that Switched On Portsmouth do around student properties at all?
I don't think there's anything specifically for student properties. I can definitely do a bit of digging and see if that is something that's available. But as far as I'm aware, there's nothing specifically for that.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Somebody's put something in here about having an HHSRS inspection soon at their property. Asked if they can advise on EPC energy efficiency. Just sort of wondering there. So that's a really interesting question. I mean, the answer is no, that they can't give you advice surrounding EPC ratings in your property. It's something that's taken into consideration. So that's essentially a risk assessment that officers in the council undertake. In the private rented sector, a lot of those sorts of inspections take place at licensed HMOs. They'll be looking at a raft of things throughout that risk assessment, and they'll be that one of the things they'll be considering is excess cold. So one of the things they might look at is the EPC to help inform that risk assessment, but they can't give you any sort of specific advice around energy efficiency. Really, it's the Switched On Portsmouth team that I would signpost you to around that. And again, Liam's sort of put in the presentation information on how to contact Switched On Portsmouth. They're the right people to give you advice around how to potentially improve the energy efficiency of your home. Liam, there's another question here. I don't think either of us will probably be able to answer this, but this might be something we can take away and come back to the group. Somebody's just asking whether planning permission is required for external installation and render replacing brickwork. I'm not too sure, to be honest with you, about that. Appreciate, Liam, you don't work in the planning team. I'm not sure if you've had sort of conversations during your work about that at all.
I'm not too sure about planning permission as such. I think the only time the kind of EWI or external wall installation kind of becomes a problem, or retrofit in general, was when you have, let's say, a listed building. I think you might need to kind of speak to the planning team if you plan to put external wall insulation on. You might be able to do like a match finish of what the property looked like beforehand. Or if you're upgrading the windows, maybe you have to kind of upgrade the windows, but keep the original pane on the outside. So yeah, I wouldn't really be able to comment on like the exact reasons why you'd need it. That'd be more for planning, but yeah, I know that certain buildings or certain conservation areas might need a bit of additional planning or thought into them.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine, Liam. Appreciate that. That's more of a planning question, to be honest. It's certainly not my wheelhouse, but I think I'm aware that within the EPC legislation, or rather the legislation that sits behind the MEES standards, there are certain exemptions, particularly around sort of conservation areas and things like that, where perhaps some of the works would sort of contradict the sort of planning requirements for the area. So, I'd imagine that that's quite a sort of technical piece of the legislation, but I definitely know that there's some bits in there around the MEES standards. So, question here, Liam. This person's done work on both their properties, take it from its previous D to a C. The EPCs aren't due for renewal until 2029. Is it worth me redoing it early to ensure a C before the overhaul? Might be a difficult one to answer again. We're dealing with potential changes that actually haven't sort of made their way through into legislation yet. There's signals from government, and there's a consultation that this is happening, but might be a bit difficult to give some advice around that. But welcome your thoughts on that, Liam.
Yeah, exactly that. Unfortunately, we don't fully know. It's possible that a property that is rated a C now in a year or two might actually fall down to a D, or could even be boosted up to a B, just depending on the EPC overhaul. I think there was mentions of having kind of a grace period for EPCs. What that's going to look like, whether it's like tenancy, like a new tenancy that will kind of set that off, or if it's more of like a time frame that would do that. I think really until nearer the time, until it's kind of given to us, I wouldn't fully know, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's like I've said already, we're sort of dealing with the unknown a little bit around that, so completely appreciate that. This is a bit of a long one, so stay with me, Liam. This person's talking about cavity wall insulation, and they're saying that they've looked at it on their personal property, and the cavity wall surveyor has actually stated that they should not get cavity wall insulation. Properties pre-1920s, and these buildings, I've been told, were designed to breathe rather than have sort of a chemical injection in the cavity or anything like that. I think their main point is if they get a professional surveyor saying do not fill your cavity walls, then they sort of expect the EPC to not negatively impact them on that point. They're sort of expressing there's a disconnect there between sort of what perhaps the EPC surveyor may say in this circumstance. I don't know that the EPC surveyor has actually said that. It's not clear from the comment, but perhaps at odds with maybe what the EPC would say and maybe what the qualified surveyor would say. Don't know if you've got any thoughts around that at all, Liam. I do think there are some exemptions that exist within the standards that talk about if the measures that are recommended aren't appropriate for the property, that's a point of challenge and potentially can give you an exemption around the minimum energy efficiency standards. And I know that there's also a comment in the regulations about whether the work would potentially devalue the property by a certain percentage. I mean, there's an awful lot of exemptions within the legislation, but I do know it sort of touches on that point. So there does seem to be a recognition of that, and it could be the case that an exemption is the way to go if the recommendations aren't something that you can actually install on your property. That's my understanding. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that, Liam.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you've had a qualified or a competent person or an expert in that line of work and they've strictly told you not to do it, I think, yeah, definitely, especially if you can get it in writing, whether an email or say it's not suitable for your property, you can look at like exemptions. In terms of EPC, they're not as in depth. Sometimes I think some people think they are. The EPC assessor will just do like visual checks of the property. They won't necessarily measure the cavity wall, put like a camera into the cavity to see if it's filled up or the depth of it. So yeah, go with your specialist. If that's really what they've recommended, then absolutely fine. Not all properties are suitable for cavity wall insulation, and then you can use that in the need of an exemption, or potentially look at additional methods to improve your property.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks ever so much, Liam. Oh, apologies. I may have missed this one earlier. So this person's talking about when we're talking about yearly savings and what that means. So that they're saying, what's the basis of yearly savings? What's that based on? And they're sort of making the comment that when the landlord's the person sort of making that investment, and really it's the occupant that's kind of saving around utility bills. Perhaps we could just confirm what we mean by yearly saving when we sort of reference that. I think we're talking about utility bills, aren't we, when we say that?
More so, yeah. So if we used solar as an example, you might spend £10,000 property to have it, £10,000, sorry, on one property to have it installed, and let's say it saves you, I don't know, £1,000 a year. Your payback period could be like 10 years, for example. The savings really would come from your energy bills or having that like smart export guarantee. So it could be something that's more benefiting your tenants in a way, but it would add value to the property essentially as well. So yeah, it really depends on the measure. Generally, it's based on energy saving per year or per month, depending.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Liam. So somebody's actually come back to a question earlier. So apologies, maybe we didn't give a complete answer on that. So just going back to the cavity wall question, they're asking who is the exemption registered with? We're talking about EPCs again, and where that exemption goes to. Liam, do you know off the top of your head where that goes to?
I'm not 100% sure, if I'm perfectly honest. I have to double check.
Yeah, I'm sort of drawing a blank on it as well. I don't think it's the EPC assessor. So that this person saying, is it the EPC assessor? There's guidance online around it, and I'm pretty sure there's an exemptions register. And if you go through the government's website, you'll be able to navigate through, and you'll find a link there.
Yeah, it's definitely not the EPC assessor. I'm just not sure if it has to go through to a local authority or to more like a central government database that would manage it. But yeah, it would be local authority or central government. It wouldn't be the EPC assessor that would deal with your exemption.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, apologies to whoever asked that question. I'm drawing a blank a little bit on that. I'm pretty sure if you go through the government website, you'll be able to find the exemptions register for EPCs, and it will sort of navigate you through the normal way. But what we'll do when we post this out afterwards is I'll go away and do some digging on that, and we'll put that in a section on the website that we share with you guys afterwards. So thank you for that. So again, this isn't really a question, but it sounds like this person's had some good outcomes actually from some of the work that they've been doing. So I'll read it out because it might be helpful for the group. So this person's saying that they've recently improved the EPC rating from D to B by installing solar PVs on their property. They're saying that's opened the door to the green mortgage options. Again, there was somebody in the chat who said that earlier. The solar PV installer first mentioned this benefit, and my independent mortgage advisor helped me secure a low interest product. As a result, I've successfully switched this month to a new remortgage with NatWest, taking advantage of the financial incentives linked to energy efficient homes. Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. Thanks ever so much for sharing that with the group. Couple of comments now about the green mortgage options that are available to people, perhaps as a further incentive really to kind of improve the thermal efficiency of properties. So yeah, really good to hear that people are sort of seeing some really good results from that. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, I'm just conscious of time a little bit, so I think we're coming to the close of this evening's webinar. Nothing else is popping up in the question. I appreciate there's a bit of a time lag, so people might be frantically typing as I'm saying this, but nothing in the Q&A that I can see at the moment. We're a bit tight for time, so I think we'll draw it to a close there. Please don't worry if you've got questions. You're going to have our email addresses after this, so please feel free to just get in touch with us, ask the questions. There's a couple of things that we've said that we'll take away and look at and sort of come back to you, so we'll absolutely do that after today. We're hoping in the next few days we'll have that content out with everybody. I guess really just the last thing from me, thanks everybody for attending, giving us your time this evening, and Liam, absolute massive thank you to you for doing all the heavy lifting this evening really, and Gemma as well, thanks for making sure the IT stayed with us and we made it through okay without any major IT glitches, so yeah, appreciate that. Thanks again to everybody for attending. Good to see you all and hope to see you at the next one. Have a nice evening. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.